Since I remember, I have had to live things that could be described as paranormal. In the house where I lived my first years, many things happened since before I was born. And I had some very strange events since my childhood, but nothing like what happened to me just a few weeks ago. First, I want to tell you that 10 or 11 years ago we lived in the house of an uncle who rented us in the Iztapalapa delegation of Mexico City, a few streets up the Cerro de la Estrella. I remember very well that in the house you could continuously see an old woman. I can't explain it well, but I also saw her, or rather I saw her silhouette, crossing the room, heading to the dining room, sometimes moving near the main door when someone was about to get home. But just as we started to see her, we suddenly stopped doing it. And a while later, for reasons that have nothing to do, we moved. We moved back to live there a little over a year ago. Now, as my older brother is married, we are less at home and I have my own room. Sometimes we still remember the old lady, but in reality everything is very quiet. You don't even suspect anything paranormal. I made friends with two boys who live nearby and I spend a lot of time with them, especially on vacation, because we don't go to the same school. A few weeks ago, a transformer rang nearby, which left us 2 streets without light. I was about to get to work. I didn't have much to say goodbye to my friends. But without light, my cell phone downloading and already darkening, I returned with them, who were talking at the banquet with a neighbor girl, of which the 3 of us are in love platonically, her mother and another lady. The truth is that there were several groups of people in the streets. I suppose that's what happens when the light goes off, and only at that moment do you remember that you can also go out to talk to the neighbors. When I approached them, I realized that they were telling ghost stories. And as I got into the conversation, I knew that they weren't just stories. Marlene, the girl, and her mother were telling the others about a lady who appears in her house and who observes them sleep at dawn. At least that was what Marlene's mother assured when she said that she and her husband had already seen her in front of the bed when they woke up for some reason in the middle of the night. The truth is that night everything was lent to talk about horror stories. The other neighbor told something that supposedly had happened on the street where I live, a girl who had been abandoned there, agonizing, and that since then, if you walked down that street after 12, you could suddenly hear some footsteps of heels walking nearby, behind you. He said that at night, when there is not much noise, if you go out into the street and pay attention, you can hear a very quiet woman's cry coming out of the darkness. Between the cars parked, the light came back and I was already a little nervous. I decided to hurry home before my parents arrived, but taking advantage of the fact that there were still people on the street, I didn't really want to hear the heels walking behind me. However, just as I turned around to my street, a thunder in the distance was the signal for the light to go away again. I turned around and walked to where my friends were, but they had already gotten in. Neither they nor Marlene were there, only the 2 ladies who were still talking on the street. I felt sorry for approaching them and having to explain to them that I did not want to get to my empty house and without light after having been talking about ghosts. So I gathered courage, convinced myself that ghosts do not exist, and rushed to walk to my house. Despite the fact that I remember having seen them before, it is admirable the tranquility that our brain can give us by convincing us that that does not exist, that we feel that at that moment it threatens us. I entered my house. The candle that I had lit before leaving, in case my parents arrived, was off. I had left it on a wide plate with water in case it fell, but it was turned off without having been consumed. I turned it on, and the dim light of the candle illuminated a figure standing behind me in the kitchen. Just looking at the wall, I threw a small, almost drowned scream at seeing it, but trying to keep quiet for the fear that it was someone who could hurt me. When I hurt myself, I suppose, that figure with the back turned his face a little towards me, without turning his body. I didn't know what to think, what to say, how to understand it. But that figure was me. Or at least, his appearance was exactly identical to mine, even with clothes that I recognized. My legs bent and I fell down to the floor without being able to scream, no matter how much I wanted. The figure slowly turned around to face me and walked. Before I got to where I was, he turned around and walked up the stairs, which I heard with all clarity as I climbed, even with a scratch that the railing does when leaning on it with force, and later I heard how he entered my room. I looked at my cell phone. Who knows how long ago the battery had completely died. And at home we only have a phone and it is wireless, so without electricity I was completely on my own at home. I couldn't even talk to my friends. As soon as I felt I could control my legs, I ran to the street. There was no one else. Small flashes of candlelight came from the windows of the houses. I thought about knocking on the door of a neighbor's house and asking them to let me stay there until my parents arrived, but I couldn't explain why I was afraid to be in my house. I was alone, and I just had to solve it. I armed myself with courage. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I would have been very scared to see a ghost, a demon or something like that, but despite the fear I felt, I also experienced a huge curiosity for that thing at home, looking exactly like me. I entered my house, took the candle, walked slowly down the stairs, but decided to know what it was about, if in reality this thing remained in my room, or if it had all been a product of my imagination. I wanted to hear voices as I climbed the stairs, voices that became silent when I leaned on the balcony and made the usual scandal. My room's door, is the first to close the stairs. I could no longer hear anything inside my room. I put the candle on the floor and tried to peek under the door, but I could not see anything at all. And there, suddenly, fear began to invade me. Suddenly I thought about what would happen if someone peeked under the door to see me, if something horrendous came running out of the room with its hands towards me to catch me. I got up and tried to get down, but I could swear I saw a silhouette standing at the end of the stairs, so I ran to the door of my parents' room before I could open it. The light suddenly turned on, and the sound of all the devices turning on somehow calmed me down for a moment, and with the light I took all the courage I had left to open the door to my room. Everything was intact. I went downstairs, and in the kitchen and the dining room, everything seemed to be completely normal. I calmed down, and my parents didn't take long to get here. I was embarrassed to tell them what had happened to me, because they're giving me more responsibility and leaving me alone at home when it's necessary for both of them to go out to attend to the family business. The truth, if I am honest with you, I am pleased and proud to think that I survived that and that now I have an interesting story to tell. But also, now I have a huge fear, panic, in reality, that the light goes away again.